It's my privilege this morning to introduce our speaker, Martin Jones. Martin is Operations Manager for CompEx, the Global Core Competency Scheme. The CompEx Scheme certification body is accredited to IEC ISO 17024-2012, which is a standard for competency of persons, electrical and mechanical practitioners, and application design engineers who work in explosive environments. CompEx has been at the forefront of increasing both offshore and onshore safety since the scheme was established to address the recommendations of the Piper Alpha offshore platform disaster in 1988. Martin is a qualified electrical engineer, having learnt his engineering skills during 20 years with British Coal Corporation and later with Kronospan, Europe's largest board panel manufacturer. Joining JTL in 2006, the CompEx scheme has developed under Martin's leadership from 11 centres to today's 35 centres, including 3 in the US. ATEC Houston offers both CompEx-EX gas and vapour modules to both IEC 60079 parts 14 and 17 and the NEC 505 code, which incorporates the API 14FZ, recommended practice for offshore installations. Would you please join me in welcoming Martin Jones?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My apologies for the accent. It's from North Wales, over in the UK, but I'll try not to speak too fast. But you lot speak fast, so I have to understand you. So if you're not sure, please ask. I'll take as many questions as you like at the end of the session. You'll see some logos at the bottom of the screen. Just by way of introduction of the scheme, JT Limited on the bottom left, that is the company that operates the CompEx scheme. CompEx is a brand. Competency in explosive atmospheres is obviously what it stands for. The association called EEMUA, which is the Engineering Equipment Material Users Association, is an association of all the major users around the world. The BPs, the Shells, the Chevron, the Conocos, and all the major oil, gas and chemical producers are members of the EEMUA association, and they provide a technical publication service, and with them we develop a practitioner's handbook, which I'll show you later, which supports the CompEx scheme. So they're part of our governance as well, so we have the major users on board with us as part of the governance of the scheme. That's a key requirement for us to ensure we deliver what the industry requires. And our company has trustees from the Electrical Contractors Association, and our company goes back to 1989 in the UK. But the Electrical Contractors Association wanted a company to be world-class assessors in the workplace to develop electricians, which is where our company originally started. So they provide the voice of the employer on our board of governance. And Unite the Union, they provide the voice of the employees as well. And we do get some very good input from the employees' voice. So we have a very balanced set of governance. And we also have representation from the Oil and Gas UK, and one of their technical authorities who operates with ConocoPhillips currently. He sits on our scheme committee. So that's just an overview of where the governance sits. So, as I said earlier, CompEx is an international scheme to recognise core competency, and I reaffirm that, core competency. It's not total competency. It can't be total competency. For safe working in potentially hazardous, flammable or explosive atmospheres. Since the scheme started in 1994, we've now certificated well over 40,000 certificates of core competency. We started with 1 commercial centre in Aberdeen, and we now have 18 centres around the coast in the UK supporting the offshore and chemical industries, and the rest, as Bill said, all of the rest, including the 35 centres, stretch all over the world from Singapore, South Africa, Azerbaijan, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, all the way across here to Houston, where we now have 3 centres. We have an excellent relationship with ATEC, and as Bill said, ATEC is the only centre currently that deliver both the IEC standards, the 679 parts 14 and 17, and the NEC code of practice, the gas and vapour modules for the NEC 505 offshore platform. So we'll get onto that later. So why was CompEx developed? In July 1988, 167 men perished on Piper Alpha's platform. The UK set about investigating and took 2 years to the day to come up with Lord Cullen's report, which resulted in 106 safety recommendations, management, practitioners, systems of work, and they're still actively being improved and worked upon, even now. Last year was Piper Alpha's 25th anniversary, and there was a conference up in Aberdeen, and a very poignant conference that was. But the recommendations were published in July 1990. Legislation in the UK demanded that the word competency and that employers must utilise competent workers. Well, everybody trains people. Everybody goes on a course. So what does competent mean? So that gave industry a real problem. How do we actually measure competency? So industry wrestled with this for the next 4 years. The way they finally arrived at measuring competency is what I'll show you here. And this is basically the skeleton of what we do with all the modules that we do on the CompEx scheme. Certainly there's entry eligibility criteria, and we put candidates on a 5-day course where they get 3 days of instruction and some workshop experience for glanding and the like. Because it's very important that we don't just test a candidate's knowledge, which is a traditional way of measuring how well they've understood the training, but it's also the ability to carry out that knowledge and practice that knowledge by way of practical performance. So how many of you have had an operation? I have. Was I hopeful that the surgeon was competent? I certainly was. And we flew over here from, I flew from Manchester on Sunday, and I was certainly hopeful the pilot was competent. And they achieved their level of competencies by a rigorous method of training initially, but also they're assessed in how they conduct their work. And that's the model that we use for CompEx. So we have an entry criteria, and in the UK traditionally that was a qualified craftsman certificate, and as we've expanded internationally, that's become more challenging. The Joint Industry Board is the grading company in the UK that agrees all the grading for different types of electricians. And up in the north of America, around New York State, you have a Joint Industry Board here, which is the same organisation. But we measure their performance on the Thursday and the Friday traditionally, and that is 4 competency validation tests, which checks the installation techniques. Have they installed the equipment correctly for the heavy current equipment, EXD, EXE, EXN, EXP. We also check that they can inspect that equipment as well, which is the EX02. Then also on the intrinsically safe side, we do an installation and an inspection modules as well. So we have 4 modules that assess the candidate's practical ability to install correctly. And then we ensure that their level of knowledge is up to the standard that we've seen over the last 20 years and benchmarked against the particular standard or code that that course is for. We give them 60 questions based only on the international standards or the NEC 505 Code of Practice. So CompEx is much more than just a training course. The candidate's underpinning knowledge and their ability to apply that knowledge is developed and assessed to determine the core competency to work safely in a potentially explosive or hazardous environment. Because if we get it wrong in that environment, we all know what happens. We'd never developed any modules specifically for the US. We'd always operated for the last 18 years the IEC 679 parts 14 for equipment and part 17 equipment installation, part 17 for the inspection and maintenance. But obviously Macondo had a big effect and an impact on the requirements, and international oil and gas companies obviously understand from each other what they do in different parts of the world, and we were approached to move away from our traditional benchmark, which is gas and vapours 1 to 4 against the international standards, and what Bill mentioned as the application design engineer module for the professional engineers. And we worked very closely with a major oil and gas user over here in Houston for a good 12 months. And then we set about piloting and developing a course which came to fruition in November last year, where we had all of BP America's engineers present, not only for the opening of the course, I might add, but they stayed on the course for the whole week. And they also did the practical assessments, and they also did the examination. And that was very challenging for them. And it was very challenging for us, because we, from the wrong side of the pond, were teaching people about the American standards. But that's what we did, and we had a very good reception. We put a lot of hard work into it, and ATEC have now got the people in place to deliver the NEC 505 course over here in the US. The 505 Code of Practice, just so everybody understands, in the Gulf of Mexico, the drilling rigs are international ships and platforms that move in and move out. So they are all installed to the international IEC code 679, and that's okay. But if you don't understand that code, that's a problem. But all the extraction platforms, or the drilling and extraction, is done on either 500 or NEC 505 code, mainly 505. 500 tends to be the refineries onshore. So our first task was to develop the 505 course, which we did. So you've now got the opportunity for electrical craftspeople from the US to work not only in the refineries against the 500 code, but also on the platforms that are extracting on the 505 code. But with the IEC that we've always delivered, they can also work on the drilling ships as well, because that's the IEC code as well. So traditionally, 4 modules, no matter what code we're operating in, and we certificate individual modules. So instrument technicians may only want to do EX03 and EX04. Guys who do the heavy current installation may only want to do EX01 and EX02. But traditionally, the majority of candidates do all the 4 modules. But it's not just about the practitioners at the sharp end, it's also about the professional engineers who, once the area classification drawing has been completed, they set to in selecting the right equipment for the predetermined zones. If they don't get it right, the practitioner doesn't stand a chance. If he's got a hookup drawing that says something that's incorrect, he's got to be a very brave practitioner to challenge that, hasn't he? And what we've found over the years is that as the understanding of the practitioners has grown, then they have challenged the professional guys. And the professional guys need to be competent as well. So we've provided a methodology for the professional application design engineers, be it in the non-intrinsically safe equipment or specialist in intrinsically safe, so they can have either module or both. We provided a methodology that they can measure their core competence also. So as I explained, EX01 and EX03 meet the competency requirements for 679.14 for operatives, selection and erection, and that's the words that come out the standard. And for EX2 and 4, they meet the requirements 679 part 17 for operatives, inspection and maintenance. EX12 only addresses 14 because it's about designers for design and selection. So what do we do on a CompEx course? They're there for 5 days. Well, we set out the course objectives. We're going through any incidents, certainly recent incidents where over here perhaps CSB have done a report and have fed in that there are things that perhaps need to change, and reminding people that there are best practice methods of working. We go through competency, as I've explained. We discuss the local regulations and the standards applicable to that part of the world. We go through the properties of gas and vapours. The one thing about properties of gas and vapours, no matter what language you're talking, the properties of an explosion are exactly the same wherever you are on the planet. We just tend to mix it up with different standards. We go through area classification, not in detail, but we go through the concept. We talk about ignition sources, environmental protection. Then we get on to equipment protection levels, and this is the bit that gets really key for the practitioner to understand exactly what that piece of kit is certificated for and where you can use that piece of kit and how you understand the label on the piece of equipment. And there's never a more challenging time in the current generation to understand the 3 different types of labels that we have even on a cable gland. An ATEX label, an IEC label and an AEX label. It's very, very challenging. We go through the different protection techniques and how they work to protect the particular equipment to prevent gas from getting in and any explosion within the equipment from getting out and creating an incentive spark where there may be a hydrocarbon cloud. We go through the wiring methods and glands, installation practices, by which time the guys are ready for the workshop, and we obviously give them a bit of workshop time on day 2 and day 3. Then we discuss in detail the inspection tables and how you maintain equipment, culminating with safe working procedures, permits to work for isolation, gas-free certificates for permission to work. And finally, equipment documentation, which is very important, because if you can't read the label, there will be a register in the place of work where the equipment documentation is held, or generally you can get access to that via the certification body on the internet. So that's the course content. For the IEC standards, we utilise a practitioner's handbook, which is EEMUA's responsibility as the Equipment Material Users Association, and that retails about $160 over here. You can order it direct off the internet on EEMUA's website. But we also give every candidate that comes on the course a white toolbox guide, which sits nice in the overall pocket. It's a waxed paper type of book, and they've got in that all the inspection tables and everything else that gives them hope in the workplace. They've been through the knowledge side, they've proved their practical ability, they've got their certificate. That becomes the workplace reference book, and it's about so thick, but it sits well in either the toolbox or in the overalls. So we provide an understanding for practitioners how to understand the standards, because sometimes, as we say in the UK, the standards are in the Queen's English to be understood by the lawyers and not necessarily by the practitioners. Well, we provide this service so that the practitioners have got references and best practice conditions how to work safely within the standards. This is an example of the type of practical assessment bays that we have in the different centres, and you'll see they're very much the same, and you'll notice the clock above the light in the I don't know when my laser's gone. You see the digital clock, and that's Kerikas's centre in Holland. And the reason I show this slide is each candidate has their own bay, but the clock is what they're working against when they do the practical assessment. And we make no apologies for that, because in real life, when you're on a platform, or in my life when I was underground, if the manager wants the oil or the coal, you've got to find a way of safely getting it to him, but without compromising safety. So we do put them under time pressure, because that is the real world, and they have to be competent at installing and maintaining and inspecting equipment in real time. So they have 2 3.5-hour practicals for installation and 2 1.5-hour practicals for inspection. So you can see that takes up most of the last 2 days of the course. Every 5 years, the standard says you need to maintain your level of competency. The international standards changed only in November last year. So we provide a refresher course every 5 years. It's a short refresher course, it's 2 days. Our whole concept when CompEx originally started was to try and keep the cost of core competency validation down for industry. We don't pay shareholders in JT Limited. The other side of the company is a registered charity. It's purely a service for industry. So the short refresher course is aimed at candidates who've passed their CompEx certificate up to 5 years ago, and they can come and do a short refresher 2-day course, which gives them a different style of practical examination, but also gives them a higher examination as well, which allows them to use the toolbox guide in the refresher, because they've got access to that guide for the last 5 years, and it tests their understanding of utilising the inspection tables more. Should the rate and scale of change of industry standards work, as they have done in November, then you can't just have a certificate for life for core competency. It's important that you keep your CPD up, and this is what we provide the refresher course for. So I've talked about NEC 505 code course for the Gulf of Mexico operations, and that is really in its infancy in terms of how we've marketed it, but we have marketed it hard up to OTC, because now we're in a position to run that course on a regular basis, having evaluated the first set of courses that we've run. We had a very good reception from BP for the way we handled their engineers, and I think it was fair to say that there was things that they picked up on the course as well, and they were a credit. They were very willing to learn. We're very happy with that initial pilot. 500 is for refineries and chemical plants. We now provide online examination for all our courses on the IEC standard, and we'll shortly be delivering that for the NEC 505 standard also. We've developed an Apple iPad for practical assessment recording rather than paper. We previously had 18 sheets of paper that were recorded by the assessors and the instructors to determine whether they were core competent or not. So we're about to sell our shares in FedEx and DHL and TNT International because we're moving into the electronic era. If you don't change, you stagnate. This will help us with faster certification. Every week we've got somebody that's due to be mobilised on the following week if he's passed his CompEx certificate. Well, if only life was as simple as that. We do have a turnaround time for certification, but these initiatives for electronically recording methodologies, that will help our certification process. We do already conduct CompEx in Dutch. We just recently translated into French. We're doing a lot of work in Algeria for BP in Algeria. It's not just BP, by the way, but we have done a lot of work with BP over the last few years. But we're now looking at a potential duty holder module. We found a gap in the market there. We've got the professional engineer covered, we've got the practitioner covered. We're still finding, even in the UK, that we've got people who take the king shilling for being the duty holder and don't really get their responsibility for their post, for their role. And we're finding that they'll have an inspection done on the plant, they'll have an asset register prepared for them. 2 years later, we hear stories of companies going in and the register has not been touched. Nobody's done any of the remedial work that was required from 2 years previously. So we're developing this duty holder module currently to fill that particular gap. We're always looking for a point of weakness where competency can be lifted. And when we address it, that strengthens the safety chain. I talked about the pilot that we did with BP, and this was the banner that ATEC prepared for us in Brinkman. And you'll see they have a unique CompEx license logo in the bottom left-hand side, and each centre that's licensed to CompEx has that logo to use on their marketing materials. And if they haven't got that logo, they're not a licensed CompEx centre. That was the opening ceremony with the chief engineers from BP. and the President and Vice President from ATEC, and Becky Himes, who's the British Consulate Chief Executive, and a pair of blunt clippers that wasn't cutting the ribbon very well for myself, but there we go. I managed to cut it in the end. Steve, who's in the audience today, was wondering whether I was going to be competent at cutting that, but that's a different story. This is a bit of the workshop training that we did with the BP engineers, just showing them cable stripping techniques, installation of glands, the different types of glands that the candidates would be expected to install. We had 3 technicians from the Mad Dog 2 platform that were on the course. They found it very interesting in terms of, and what was interesting as well, they found some workarounds with the practical assessments that we'd not seen before. So they certainly fed back to us. They could understand why this course was been promoted by BP. So our target audience is 80% of what we do is electrotechnical and instrument practitioners. That's the core business for the CompEx scheme. 3 years ago, we developed a mechanical practitioners course, because it's no good having everything boxed off electrically if you've got the potential for frictional ignitions in an explosive atmosphere. And we were getting feedback from the Health and Safety Executive, who were also on our Board of Governance in the UK, and they were saying, we've got a real problem with the standard of motor pump sets, and we've got so many potential for frictional ignitions and loss of containment. That became their core line of inspection over the last 3 years. So in conjunction with them, we developed a mechanical course that helped address competencies for mechanical practitioners. I've mentioned the duty holders that we've got under development. I've mentioned the application design engineers for the professional end. We've also got, for anybody who wants to understand explosive atmosphere awareness, who isn't actually a qualified electrician or mechanic, but need an understanding, we even have HR managers going on this course, and it's a 2-day foundation course, examination only, no practical assessment. The whole idea is to get an understanding, perhaps class and zone, and how that operates and what it means, ignition sources, protection concepts. It's just an overview with the only course that we do with an underpinning knowledge exam only at the end of the 2 days. The mechanical course, we developed this with Shell in close to where I live in North Wales, in Ellesmere Port. And Shell Stanlow's refinery, their chief mechanical engineer came on our working party. Martin, he said, we know what you've done with CompEx electrically. We want you to do it mechanically, but don't give us a 5-day course. We're mechanical guys, remember. Monday is to get over the weekend. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's fine. Friday, we're looking forward to the weekend. Please give us a 3-day course. So we always listen. We discuss this. And when we looked at it, we decided that there was already in place the foundation course, which would give the mechanical practitioners an overview of some of the electrical problems that they would normally walk past in day-to-day operation. Because the Health and Safety Executive said to us, don't just teach them the mechanics, we want them to understand the broad concepts. So we give them a mechanical course and give them a theory exam in that, and they also have a mechanical practical assessment based on a motor pump set. And we've had nearly 1,000 mechanical practitioners who've been on that course in the last 3 years. And over here in Houston, two of our centres are developing the EX11 mechanical course here to address mechanical competencies. This is one of the centres where you'll see the motor pump set, and this is where the practical assessment is conducted. This is the isolation boards, where they have to take charge of their own isolation. Well, Bill mentioned CompEx is an internationally accredited scheme. It is, and our company, JT Limited, is the CompEx certification body. And it is the CompEx certification body that is accredited by the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, And if we were based over in the US, perhaps ANAB would be the accreditation body that would certificate us in the US against the same standard. So they have different bodies across the world who can provide the accreditation. That accreditation took me and the quality manager 3 years to get to a stage where we were awarded the accreditation for personnel certification, and that was in October 2010. So we finally got the recognition that we'd always strive for the CompEx scheme. So we now can claim quite genuinely that it is an internationally accredited scheme. And if you don't believe me, that's the certificate, and it's got 0270 below the logo. That's our certification body name. You can go on the UCAS website and look at certification bodies, and you'll find us under a list of a number of companies that do certification of persons, but not necessarily in the sector. That, in fact, there's only 2 of us that are actually in the EX atmosphere sector that have got UCAS accreditation against that standard. And the reason there's a 6th issue in the middle is because every time over the last few years when we've developed the course, we've asked for an extension of scope. So that's the 6th revision, and we've just enjoyed the 7th one. We've had our annual, we've had a 4-year cycle, because it's 2014 now, and they operate on a 4-year cycle. And we've had our 4-year accreditation review. So we've been given the re-accreditation for the next 4 years, depending on the assessors visiting the centres. And one day they're going to come to Houston. Brian, where are you? Is he in here? Anyway, he's coming to ATEC, but I don't know when. And he'll be coming to the other centres. And that's how they do it. They witness the assessment of what the candidates are going through. And they put on the countries at the bottom of the list, and this is last year's certificate. There's a number of countries that have been added to that. So it shows anybody who wants to look at this independently that we've independently got international accreditation for what we conduct. Where do we operate? Well, in the UK, we've got 3 centres now in Aberdeen, which is the hub of the oil and gas industry in the UK. As you work your way down the east side of the UK and you get to Falkirk and Grangemouth, where there's a couple of large refineries, there's 2 centres there. The northeast, with 5 centres. You've moved lower down to Lowestoft area, where the big gas fields are off the east coast. There's a couple of centres there. On the south coast, Southampton and Yeovil. South Wales, God's country, Neath and Pembrokeshire. And up near where I live, near Chester, in Ellesmere Port, we have 2 centres there. So that's 20, and then the rest, the other 15, we've 3 centres over in the US, 2 based in Houston and 1 in Dallas. We've 2 in Holland, and another one in development that's addressing the German market now. Baku in Azerbaijan, that's been there 8 years. That addresses specifically the Sangha Shell terminal work for the Caspian Sea. And as a result of that, Georgia is now in preparation. The Middle East, Doha, Qatar. We've had a centre there for about 7 years. 2 recently licensed in Oman, one with PDO directly. Shell Petroleum Development Corporation in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, was licensed last year. We have a centre just south of Johannesburg with a big gasification plant in Sasolburg, and 2 centres over in Singapore. So we have quite a footprint across the world now, and it's increasing as we go. Our air miles are certainly increasing as the scheme increases, but it's our core activity. If we can help make the workplace safer by what we do, then it's not too much trouble. We've got current developments over in Kazakhstan because of the big oil and gas fields there. Dubai and Abu Dhabi, there'll be centres there this year, and we have Shell Centre in the Philippines that'll come on stream in June. So our footprint is getting ever larger. And our map gets more out of date the more times I show this slide. So, I provided you with what we believe is our global solution for competency route to safety. But as I said earlier, if the safety chain's got a weak link in it, we've all got a problem. So people who design, install, maintain and manage workplaces where dangerous explosive atmospheres may be present have an opportunity in the early stages when directives and regulations and international standards and NEC codes are developed. Industry experts are asked to feed into the consultation process to develop the standard. And I know when everybody's busy at work it becomes difficult, but generally the major users provide a technical expert that sits on a committee and they develop the standards. So we pretty much got that boxed off. That's fine. Then we have equipment and materials. In order to have equipment and materials to be utilised in an explosive atmosphere, we have to go through product testing and certification. So that is independently checked as well. So up to that stage, we've pretty much got that boxed off. Most certification bodies for equipment have 17025 international standard, and that provides an independent check at what they're doing is correct. Then the management for the people who design the workplace and select the equipment, the professional engineers, we pretty much thought we got that boxed off as well. But when Piper Alpha happened, they were the three that we certainly didn't have sorted. The installers, the inspectors and the practitioners that maintained, enhanced and replaced equipment in the workplace. CompEx addressed that by providing the EX1 to 4 modules initially, and we've done that in different categories. We've done it for dust, we've done it for fuel forecourts, we've done it for water industries, and now we've done it for mechanical. So I could add mechanical into that link as well. And if all those safety links are working correctly, then the people who've put up the money for the capital asset, that's enhanced their safety across the life cycle of that capital asset. Technical management, he can sleep at night. He's got things covered from his from the certification body for the equipment, through his professional engineers who's selecting the equipment, and he's got the knowledge that the people that he's got in place and the contractors he's using, because bear in mind, that potentially is another weak link. It's okay having your employees competent, but if your contractors haven't got the same level of competency, there's another weak link in the chain. So he's got his duty of care rests a bit more easier on his shoulders when he's got a competent workforce working for him. So just an overview of how the scheme's operated. Since 1994, when the scheme actually started with one centre, for the last 17 years up to 2011, we just got over 30,000 candidates through CompEx. So 2011, 3 years ago. The last 12 months, back to April 2013, there have been over 6,000 registrations. So our growth in the last few years is remarkable, and the main reason for that is we're bringing on centres in different parts of the world to the same quality that we've only ever. That's the one thing we won't do, is compromise on the quality of the centre wherever we license a new centre, because the quality of the centre potentially is my weak link as a certification body manager, because that potentially threatens our accreditation. So all the centres understand that. We had everybody together 2 weeks ago from all the centres over in the UK for a world conference in Tankersley, West Yorkshire. And that was 80 delegates from all the family of CompEx who comes together. We keep them updated with what's happening with the international standards, and we give them what's going on with CompEx, both the last 12 months and the following 12 months. So they're up to speed, rather than everybody picking up emails on phones and iPads and everything else that we all do in our spare time. So at this rate, 50,000 should have been achieved if we'd have looked at it back in 2011 by 2016. And I'll predict now that by September or October this year, we'll pass the 50,000 mark in our 20th year. So it is keeping us busy. But the competency has displaced the word training in most countries' language. And certainly I hear the word competency in a lot of the written words that are done for OTC now. I didn't 3 or 4 years ago, I certainly do now. Competency is certainly becoming the methodology moving forward. So what's our vision? We hope that the CompEx scheme can assist you to make workplaces a safer place, which will increase safety and protection for the workforce, primary consideration, and protect the capital asset, because for the investors and for the people that operate the plant, that's very important to secure the business moving forward. Just have a look on YouTube, CSB videos, and have a look how long it takes to get capital assets replaced when there's been a major disaster there. So I hope you've had an understanding about staff competencies in explosive atmospheres. We certainly believe it's a proven methodology. If our candidate rates was going down, I couldn't stand here and tell you that. It's certainly not. It's certainly going the other way. So CompEx as a brand is fully embedded in the oil, gas and chemical industries for the last 20 years. We developed it for the major users, with the major users, to enhance the protection of the workers, the workplace and the capital asset. And finally, what we'll put there. Thank you. That was it.